All right, let's dive in today, huh? We're going to be looking at political promises. You know that classic tale, right? Politician says one thing and then,
Yeah, do as I say, not as I do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But today was going to zero in on President Trump's cabinet. Some instances where it looks like they maybe backtracked on what they were saying before they were confirmed.
The good old campaign promises versus reality of governing situation.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the source material for this deep dive, it's a Korean news article. Title is, get this, Hia, Oya, Oi, Oyo.
Okay, try saying that 3 times fast.
No way. But it translates to Trump cabinet, cases of broken promises. And it's from a publication known for its political analysis. They lean a little conservative, though.
Interesting. That'll definitely color how they present these inconsistencies.
For sure, right?
Yeah.
So first up, Kash Patel, current FBI director. Now, before he was appointed, he seemed to be on the same page with the FBI Agents Association, saying that the deputy director should be a career agent, would have kept a 117-year tradition going.
Wow, that's a long time. That really says something about the FBI's, culture. Promoting from within. Valuing that deep experience.
Right. But then Trump appoints Dan Bongino as deputy director, who's a conservative pundit and former Secret Service agent. And Patel's publicly celebrating this appointment. So, what gives? Was this Patel just bending to the pressure? Or did he actually change his mind?
Well, put yourself in Patel's shoes, right?
Okay.
The FBI director answers to the president. And the president and FBI, well, they've had a rocky relationship, especially lately. Putting someone loyal to the administration like Bongino in as deputy director, that could be a way to get a little more control over the FBI.
Yeah, so maybe not so much Patel changing his mind, but more about, the power dynamics at play.
Yeah.
But what about the FBI itself? What does this do?
The FBI takes pride in those internal promotions. Appointing Bongino, that sends a message. Maybe loyalty matters more now than experience. What do you think that does to the morale of all those agents who've been working their way up?
I bet it's got to sting a little. Okay, let's switch gears completely. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Health and Human Services Secretary. During his confirmation hearings, he told those senators point blank that he wouldn't touch the vaccination schedule. You know, the one recommended by the CDC.
Mm-hmm. Seemed pretty clear on that.
Right. But then, first speech to HHS employees, what does he say? He's going to investigate that very same schedule. Nothing is off limits, he says. And then he throws this in. Pesticides, food additives, even electromagnetic waves, all part of this investigation. What?
That's a pretty big change in tone. During confirmation, he was all about that established medical consensus, Now he's opening the door to some alternative ideas. I bet some folks in the medical community are a little nervous.
For sure. This isn't just gathering information, right? Especially with those electromagnetic waves and all that. It's like he's shifting the whole focus, maybe toward a more holistic approach to health.
Could be. Makes you think, is this about science? Or is it about, appeasing certain groups who aren't so sure about vaccines and traditional medicine?
And what does that do to public trust in the CDC? Big question there.
Huge. We've already seen how dangerous misinformation can be, especially when it comes to health. If the HHS secretary is seen as undermining good science, well, that could be bad news.
It could be. Okay, you know what else seems like a shift in priorities? Scott Bessent and those Russia sanctions. During confirmation, he was all about getting tougher. Said the previous administration wasn't nearly aggressive enough.
Yeah, he was coming in hot, that's for sure. Lots of talk about economic pressure on Russia.
Totally. But then later, he says that the U.S. could either intensify or reduce those sanctions. It all depends on Russia's willingness to negotiate. Wait, so which is it? Strong-arming or talking it out?
It does seem a bit contradictory, doesn't it? But, world affairs, they rarely fit into neat little boxes. Maybe Bessent's realized that being flexible is actually the best way to, get things done.
So maybe he's just adjusting to the realities on the ground.
Maybe. But sanctions are a powerful tool, and there's a lot riding on this.
No kidding. All right, let's move on to Brooke Rollins, the Agriculture Secretary. Before taking office, she made it clear, avian flu response is top priority. Seemed like she understood how serious this was.
Absolutely. She's talking about getting the right team together. Made sense. Avian flu, that's a big deal. Affects the economy, even people's health.
For sure. But then she brings in the Department of Government Efficiency into the USDA.
Mm-hmm.
And this initiative, they're known for streamlining, which sometimes means downsizing. And guess what? They ended up rehiring several employees who'd been let go, employees who were working on that avian flu response. Talk about mixed messages.
Wow, yeah, that's confusing. 1 minute it's all hands on deck for avian flu, the next minute it's budget cuts and streamlining.
So, are these conflicting priorities? Or is there a way to make sense of these, opposite approaches?
Well, every administration wants to show they're being responsible with money, right? Maybe Rollins is trying to, I don't know, walk a tightrope. Strong response to the avian flu, but also keeping an eye on the budget.
Tough spot to be in. And what about those employees who got rehired?
Right.
That's got to mess with your head, right?
Absolutely. It's like they're stuck in the middle. Tough situation all around.
Yeah. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here. 4 cabinet members and their, shall we say, evolving stances. We'll be back in a jiffy to keep digging into these political promises and what they tell us about the reality of being in charge.
Yeah, it's easy to just say, they broke their promises. But I think there's more to it than that. These are people with real jobs, and they're under a ton of pressure making decisions that affect, well, everyone.
Yeah, no kidding. Like with Kash Patel and the FBI. Appointing Bongino. Yeah, maybe it's about control. But what if it blows up in their faces? What if it just makes the FBI more divided?
Exactly. Is this going to create a more loyal FBI? Or a less effective one? I guess we'll see.
Then there's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And that whole vaccine thing. It does seem like he's, going back on what he said. But maybe, I don't know, maybe he really thinks this investigation is important.
It's possible. Maybe he's trying to find a middle ground,
Yeah.
Address those concerns, but also stick to the science. But throwing in things like pesticides and electromagnetic waves, that's a little out there, isn't it?
It is. Makes you wonder what his real goals are here.
Yeah.
And could it actually hurt public health? Could be.
Yeah, it's a risky move, that's for sure. And it shows how hard it is to talk about science in a way that everyone understands, and that everyone trusts.
Right. And speaking of risky moves, what about Scott Bessent and those Russia sanctions? Maybe all that tough talk was just for show. Maybe he's realized that you got to be a little more, diplomatic.
Could be. Easier said than done, though, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing to talk about sanctions. It's another thing to actually use them.
To figure out how to use them well. It's like you want to put pressure on Russia,
Yeah.
but you also need to leave room to, talk things out.
It's a balancing act, that's for sure. High stakes, too.
Okay, the last one. Brooke Rollins and the avian flu.
It's that classic problem, right? Short-term needs versus long-term goals.
Yeah.
You've got this urgent health crisis. People need help now. But then you've got the budget and making sure the government is running smoothly.
And streamlining often means cutting, which could mean fewer people to deal with that avian flu.
Exactly. So what do? It's easy for us to talk about it, but she's the one who has to make the tough calls.
And you have to wonder, can she really do both? Or is something going to have to give?
And it's not just about the money, right? It's about those employees who were let go and then rehired. Can you imagine?
Talk about a roller coaster.
Yeah.
How are you supposed to feel good about your job when, you're being pulled in all these different directions?
It's rough. So, what have we learned today? We've seen how those campaign promises, well, sometimes they clash with reality. And then you get shifts in priorities, different approaches, even things that seem, kind of contradictory. It reminds us that politics isn't simple. There's always more to this story.
And we need to pay attention, right? Talk about these things and hold our leaders accountable, not just for what they said they would do, but for what they're actually doing.
We can't just sit back and watch. We have to be part of this.
Couldn't agree more. We'll be back in a few minutes to wrap up our deep dive into the world of political promises. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back. And you know what? This whole thing, it's really got me thinking about those campaign promises. How much weight should we actually give them?
Yeah, good question. Are they set in stone? Or are they more like a starting point?
Because think about it. Candidates, they want to win, right? So they got to promise the moon, make it sound like they've got all the answers. But governing, it's not that easy, is it?
No way. It's about balancing different needs, making tough decisions, and sometimes you got to roll with the punches. Campaigning, that's all about the big picture, the big ideas. But actually governing, you got to be flexible.
So how do we, the voters, figure this out? When a politician seems to, change their tune, do we hold them to that original promise, even if things have changed? Or do we cut them some slack?
It's tough, right? I think you got to look at it case by case. What was the intention behind that promise? What's going on in the world now? And what happens if they keep that promise? What happens if they break it?
So it's not just about did they keep their word or not. It's about the why.
Exactly. And that means we got to think critically. look beyond the headlines, really try to understand what's going on.
Ask the tough questions, make sure things are transparent, and hold those leaders accountable. Promises or no promises.
And we can't just sit on the sidelines. We have a role to play here, you know? We got to stay informed, get involved, and not be afraid to challenge things.
Well said. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into these political promises, what's the one thing you really hope people take away from this?
I think it's this. Don't just take things at face value. Ask questions. Dig deeper. Demand more from our leaders. And those campaign promises, don't forget about them. Hold those promises up, look at them closely, and use them to judge how those leaders are doing.
That's a great point. And on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Keep those minds working. We'll see you next time.